What's up, guys? Today I'm going to be ranking my top 10 GOATs of the UFC. This is extremely subjective. Obviously, a lot of people, what they think of greatest and such is very subjective and is different for everyone. So my top 10 is not going to be your top 10. That's totally fine. Debate me about it in the comments, but I'm basing my list off of title defenses, strength of competition, and I would say somewhat dominance. But mostly, strength of competition is the most important thing. So let's get right into it. At the number 10 spot, I got my boy Stipe Miocic. Listen, Stipe with 4 title defenses, 3 consecutive at heavyweight. The best heavyweight to ever do it in the UFC, in my opinion. 6 title wins, a 6-win streak. And yeah, his notable wins are very stacked. 2 wins against Daniel Cormier, a win against Francis Ngannou, and a win over JDS, which was a fight he avenged. A win over Alistair Overeem, a win over Fabricio Verdum, and Andrei Arlovski and Mark Hunt. All these guys were great coming up. Not to mention, Stipe avenged all of his losses. He has not avenged, but he has a win over every single fighter he's ever fought, which to me is impressive. He's 20-4, and he fights Jon Jones this weekend, and he has a chance to do the funniest thing. But listen, people need to put some respect on Stipe's name. A lot of people don't have him in their top 10 GOATs list, and I can understand him being in like 11 to 15. But for me, I have him in my top 10 just because of how hard it is to defend the title at heavyweight, given that one technical error and you can get KO'd brutally. It's just those guys are so big. They all have one-punch knockout power pretty much. So you really got to be on your P's and Q's when it comes to defense. And yes, Stipe has shown to be the greatest heavyweight in the UFC so far, in my opinion. So I got him at the number 10 spot. Let's move on to my number 9, Anderson Silva. Now, Anderson Silva has the longest win streak in UFC history at 16. 11 title wins with 10 title defenses. He was on a 7-year unbeaten streak as champion. And yeah, very impressive from Anderson Silva. 2 wins over Chael Sonnen. The first one was a fluke, let's admit it. A win over Vitor Belfort, front kicked him in the face. A lackluster win over Maia. Destroyed Forrest Griffin, destroyed Dan Henderson, and destroyed Rich Franklin twice. And the thing that holds Anderson Silva back from being higher is his strength of competition wasn't the best. But listen, he was doing what he was supposed to. Aside from Chael Sonnen, he was destroying the competition, beating up everybody, outstriking him, making him look silly on the feet, even hitting some submissions here and there. Anderson Silva, he was ahead of his time in terms of striking, I'd say, and he didn't have the best competition. But for me, to go on a 16-win streak and 10 title defenses, he's still in my top 10. He's still the middleweight GOAT for me, so I got him at the number 9 spot. Let's move on to the next fighter on this list. At number 8, we got my boy, the Blessed Express, Max Holloway. 3 title defenses for Max, 4 title wins, a 13-fight win streak. And before he lost to Volk, man, he was 18-0 at featherweight before fighting Topuria, if you don't count the Volk losses. But obviously, you count the Volk losses. But Max Holloway has one of the most insane resumes. He was a champion, and he won the BMF belt, which doesn't really do much for your GOAT status. But he has notable wins over Justin Gaethje, Korean Zombie, Arnold Allen, Yair Rodriguez, Calvin Kattar, Frankie Edgar, Brian Ortega. He beat Jose Aldo twice in his prime. Anthony Pettis, Charles Oliveira way back in the day, Cub Swanson. I mean, this guy has beat the who's who of featherweight and even at lightweight some good wins. He does have a good bit of losses. That's what holds Max back from being higher on this GOAT list. He didn't have the longest title run, and once he lost the belt, he was not able to regain it. And now at 32 years old, coming off a knockout loss to Topuria, it's going to be a hard road if Max Holloway is ever going to get a title. And he's going to be fighting at lightweight. But in his current MMA resume, I do have him as in my top 10 greatest UFC fighters of all time at number 8. Just the win streak and the impressive title run he was able to go on and just dominating everybody. And yeah, he has some losses, man, but Max Holloway, one of the most skilled fighters and one of the greatest chins we've ever seen. So gotta have him at the number 8 for myself. Let's go to the next fighter on this list. We got Khabib Nurmagomedov at number 7. Listen, title defenses, 3 for Khabib, 4 title wins, 13-fight win streak in the UFC, undefeated, the only undefeated fighter on this list. Notable wins, Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, Edson Barboza, and Rafael dos Anjos. Pretty good competition right there, but not the best competition. Out of his 13 wins, for me to only be able to put 5 as notable and the other 8's kind of eh. It's like Khabib is really good. He's the most dominant fighter we've ever seen inside the UFC. He was never cut in the octagon. He dropped a total of like 2 or 3 rounds in his entire career. But the thing that holds Khabib back, in my opinion, it always has, 1, the strength of competition, and 2, he never fought fighters to give him resistance. Like, he never fought incredible, dangerous grapplers like a Charles Oliveira or somebody who could threaten like submissions. He fought Justin Gaethje, a white belt on the mat. He fought Dustin Poirier, who has proven to not have good submission defense as he's been submitted in all 3 of his title fights. And he fought Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor had decent ground game in jiu-jitsu, but not the best. Edson Barboza, he couldn't even finish him on the ground. RDA, he destroyed RDA. But listen, let me not shit on Khabib. Khabib is amazing. One of the greatest fighters to ever exist. 29-0, dominant wrestling, dominant ground and pound, amazing submissions if he wanted to. Listen, this guy was toying with his opponents. He was showing mercy to Justin Gaethje in his fight, saying that he switched from armbar to triangle so he'd go to sleep instead of breaking his arm. This guy was ruthless, but I have to put him at number 7 and no higher because his length of competition, and he retired too early, in my opinion. In the middle of his prime, I get it, because his father passed away and he did not want to fight forward after that. But for me, he's number 7 just because he didn't fight long enough and he needed to rack up more title defenses, in my opinion. But nonetheless, Khabib is top 10, in my opinion. Number 7 for me. Let's move on to the number 6 guy on this list. We got Alexander Volkanovski. Listen, Bald Volk was a different beast. 5 title defenses, 6 title wins, an 11-fight win streak at featherweight. And what's incredible about Volk is he has 3 wins over Max Holloway, all by decision. You know how hard it is to beat Max Holloway by decision? Like, Ilia Topuria just knocked him out. Fair enough. It's extremely hard to knock out Max Holloway, too, just because he has an insane chin. But to beat Max Holloway by decision whenever he gets stronger as the rounds go on, Volkanovski did it 3 times. Definitively in the 3rd fight. And Max Holloway's on this list, so that's an all-time win. And then he has a win over Yair Rodriguez, and that's a good win, but Yair, he just got destroyed by Volk on the ground. Korean Zombie, that was pretty sad to watch. He beat up Brian Ortega outside of 2 submission attempts. He beat Jose Aldo in his prime at 33, and he destroyed Chad Mendez. And listen, even going up to fight Makhachev, he gave Makhachev the fight of his life in the first fight when they fought in Australia, and then he got KO'd in the second fight. But Volk, one of the best strikers we've ever seen, some of the best submission defense we've ever seen. Just amazing boxing and kickboxing and good defense all around. Gotta have him at number 6, one of the hardest workers ever. Volk is the perfect example of like hard work over talent. That's Volk. So yeah, gotta have my boy in the top 6 at number 6. Let's move on to number 5. Demetrius Johnson for me is number 5. 11 title defenses, 12 title wins, and a 13-win streak. Notable wins, Henry Cejudo and Joseph Benavidez. I could have put like the John Dodsons of the world and the Ian McCalls, but to me, or the Ray Borgs or the Wilson Hayes, but to me, those aren't notable wins. Like, those guys aren't great. I don't know. I guess I could have been a little bit more generous with the notable wins, but DJ did what he was supposed to do. The competition in front of him, he destroyed him for so long. This guy had the most title defenses in UFC history at 11, the second most title wins, I believe, at 12, maybe the 3rd most, and one of the longest win streaks at 13. And listen, the longevity of DJ cannot be stressed enough. This guy went to the one championship after the UFC, got the belt there, lost it, and then got it back by beating the guy with the same way he got beat, with the flying knee knockout, and then beat him again before retiring. Demetrius Johnson, one of the greatest, and I think what's underappreciated about Demetrius Johnson is how skilled he is. So although his strength of competition wasn't the best, just his like being one of the most well-rounded fighters in history, I got to put him at number 5 for myself, even though his wins weren't the best. He did what he was supposed to do. He dominated the competition. He finished most of his guys. He finished Wilson Hayes by submission, who was a black belt. He finished Ray Borg with the flying armbar or whatever that was. He finished Henry Cejudo in the first fight. He finished Joseph Benavidez in the rematch. Like, the dude was getting finishes. Even whenever he left to go to 1 and he's in his late 30s, still getting finishes. And he's competing in jiu-jitsu competitions and winning, which is insane. So DJ, one of the greatest mixed martial artists to ever do it. I got to have him at number 5. Most title defenses in UFC history, despite the low level of competition. Respect to my boy Demetrius Johnson at number 5. Moving on to number 4, Jose Aldo. Listen, Jose Aldo from 2005 until 2015, he was undefeated, 9.5-year win streak. 7 title defenses in the UFC, 8 title wins, notable wins. This guy has notable wins in the bantamweight and featherweight division. He did it at featherweight for so long, and then in the latter half of his career, switched to bantamweight and still did the damn thing. Wins over Rob Font, Pedro Munoz, schooled Marlon Vera. A lot of people forget this. He beat Moicano back in the day, destroyed Jeremy Stevens, busted up Frankie Edgar in the rematch, and I think they fought twice, maybe in the first fight too. Beat Chad Mendez twice, which Mendez was a beast. Has a win over Uriah Faber back in the day. A win over Cub Swanson. And Aldo has fought for the featherweight title. And he had the interim title at featherweight. He got the undisputed back at featherweight. And then he went down to bantamweight, and he had a title run where he lost to Piotr Jan in the 5th round, but looked good in that fight. Listen, Aldo, what's impressive about him is even at his ripe age of 38, he's still competing with these young guys and looking to be in the prime of his career. Maybe with the help of something, maybe not. Who knows? But the longevity of Jose Aldo, the speed, the technique, one of the greatest anti-wrestlers of all time, solid ground game, but not threatening with jiu-jitsu, but really good striking. He used to be a great kicker, but in the latter half of his career, he definitely switched to focusing on his hands. A lot of people don't have Aldo in their top 5 and think his resume is overrated. For me, it's properly rated. I think he deserves to be in the top 5. He did it in 2 divisions, and he became a champion and had 7 title defenses. Not too many people can say that. So I think Aldo has an amazing resume. I have him at my number 4. But yeah, let's move on to number 3 on this list. I have Islam Makhachev at number 3. Why so much higher than Khabib? Well, let's talk about it. He has the same amount of title defenses, the same amount of title wins, one more higher of a win streak at 14, and he's beat better competition, and he has more finishes than Khabib in the octagon. So I think resume versus resume, Islam was the more well-rounded fighter, and he has better notable wins than Khabib. The only thing Khabib had over Islam is that he had 0 losses and he was more dominant. Fair enough. But Islam has wins over Dustin Poirier, Charles Oliveira, 2 wins over Volkanovski, or 1.5 technically. Bobby Green, Dan Hooker, Drew Dober, Arman Sarukian, even coming up, Davey Ramos. Who else? Thiago Moises. Like, I didn't add those guys because I don't think they're notable wins, but they're still solid wins. And yeah, Islam Makhachev, I think he's already the lightweight GOAT. One of the greatest fighters we've ever seen. A 14-fight win streak. He's actually 3 fights away from breaking the all-time record of 16, if he can get to 17. And yeah, I think he's going to defend his belt again against Arman Sarukian, further in his legacy. But for me, right now in this moment, I have Islam at number 3. That's going to come to a shock to a lot of people, and people are going to think this is too high. But for me, man, just the level of skill and the ability to finish most of his opponents. He finished Charles Oliveira on the ground. Fair enough, he knocked him down and then did it. But still, finished him on the ground. He finished Dustin Poirier after a war in the 5th round by choke. He had a tough fight with Volkanovski and then KO'd him in the rematch. Fair enough, it was on short notice. Destroyed Bobby Green, destroyed Dan Hooker, destroyed Drew Dober. Out-grappled Arman Sarukian in the first fight, despite being close. Islam Makhachev, one of the most skilled fighters we've ever seen. And if he gets a win over Arman Sarukian and then gets another win over Ilia Topuria, we might be talking about the GOAT of the sport, boys. But for now, I have him at my number 3 spot. I think that's a fair placement in terms of my criteria and what I go by. One of the most skilled fighters we've ever seen, and he has the level of competition to back it up, in my opinion. And yeah, he's in the prime of his career at 33 years old. So let's see how much he can further that. Let's move on to number 2. I think you guys know who the last 2 are. Number 2, GSP. Listen, the most impressive thing for GSP for me, sorry, I said that backwards, is that GSP has avenged every loss he's ever had. He has 2 losses to Matt Serra and Matt Hughes. Matt's were his Achilles heel, apparently. GSP avenged both of those losses, beating Matt Serra in the rematch and actually coming back to beat Matt Hughes twice. He also has 2 wins over BJ Penn, a win over interim champ Carlos Condit at the time, destroyed Nick Diaz, dominated him, arguably lost against Johnny Hendricks, but it was a win. Went over Michael Bisping to go up and win the middleweight title. So GSP is also a 2-division champion, 9 title defenses, 13 title wins, 13-fight win streak in the UFC. And yeah, what is there to say about GSP? He was ahead of his era. He beat nearly 3 generations of fighters. Some of the best wrestling, and what's impressive about GSP's wrestling is that he wasn't like an NCAA All-American or an Olympian. He literally trained and learned wrestling while doing MMA. Like GSP's just like a natural trained wrestler that didn't like do it for a living. He just kind of learned it as he went. And then he developed his striking. He had solid submissions. The only thing that goes against GSP is that towards the end of his career, he definitely fought to decision a lot more. He wasn't fond of the finish. In the beginning of his career, GSP was finishing everybody, but he definitely became a decision fighter towards the end. Nonetheless, GSP is one of the most skilled fighters we've ever seen. And I think even today, if you were to throw him in the mix in his prime, he could contest with a lot of the guys at welterweight we have right now. He's just that skilled. The dude was amazing for his time, way ahead of his time, destroyed the competition. And yeah, he's got to be at my number 2, as he is for most people. I mean, George's St Pierre, the GOAT. Let's move on to number 1. It's no secret. You guys know how I feel about Jon Jones. I don't really like Jon Jones, but there's no denying his resume. 12 title defenses total, 15 title wins, 18 unbeaten streak in the UFC. Notable wins, I mean, this guy has insane notable wins. Cyril Gane, Dominic Reyes, yes, he lost that fight, but on paper, it's a win. Thiago Santos, Anthony Smith, Alexander Gustafsson twice, Daniel Cormier once, because the other fight was a no contest. Destroyed Glover Teixeira in his prime. Destroyed Chael Sonnen. Destroyed Vitor Belfort by submission after almost getting submitted. Destroyed Rashad Evans. Choked Lyoto Machida in one of the scariest submissions. Choked out Rampage Jackson. Knocked out Shogun for the belt. Took Ryan Bader's undefeated record. He also took Daniel Cormier's undefeated record. Listen, Jon Jones is one of the greatest. Now, he's the greatest mixed martial artist of all time. And when you consider that he did it at light heavyweight, the heavier weight classes where you can get KO'd in one punch if you're not careful, that's what's most impressive. Like, he's so ahead of the curve when it comes to like skill. Because in my opinion, and most people's opinion, it's just not even an opinion and a fact. The higher you go up in the weight classes, the lower the skill level tends to be. Because guys that are bigger don't typically practice in the grappling as much. They depend on their power more. So you don't really see too many guys at light heavyweight like as like jiu-jitsu specialists. You see more strikers that are just like meatheads that just like go for the knockout, like a Jamal Hill, like a Magomed Ankalaev. I'm joking. Either way, Jon Jones, he's also the youngest UFC champion. The only thing that goes against Jon Jones is that he's literally been stripped of the title 3 times. He's tested positive for PEDs multiple times. He's beat on his wife. And yeah, that to me, all that makes him a shitty person. But in terms of resume, man, there's no denying this guy has the greatest MMA resume to ever exist. And if he never got stripped and kept his stuff in line, he'd have had like 15, 16 title defenses, maybe even more, 18 title defenses. And that just would have been insane on paper. But he was stripped multiple times, and he came back. And every time he came back, he still tended to win his fights. And then he moved up to heavyweight after 3 years and destroyed Cyril Gane in the first round. And it does leave a sour taste in my mouth that we're not going to see him versus Tom Aspinall because he's going to fight Stipe at UFC 309 and then retire. But it is what it is. Jon Jones is the greatest of all time. I don't think he'll hold on to that spot forever because just guys are just so good. And modern day MMA, the fighters are better. And I think somebody's going to build up a better resume and eventually take over. But for now, and probably at least for a few more years, we're going to see Jon Jones as the number 1 pound for pound. Let's see what happens this weekend. Maybe he loses to old man Stipe. That would be the biggest troll and biggest meme ever. But yeah, guys, this is my top 10 UFC GOATs. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Is my list garbage? Am I delusional? Am I a casual? I don't know. This is what I got. If you guys can craft a better list or anything, drop it in the comments. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, if you enjoy the content. And I'm going to be streaming in the upcoming days. So look out for that, guys. Appreciate it. And I'm out. Peace.